Right now, you are probably drunk, or about to be, and the last drink you had, you barely thought about. You just drank it and moved on. But that one swallow ties you to something older than writing, older than farming, older, in fact, than humanity itself. Our romance with alcohol did not begin a few thousand years ago with the first winery or the first brewery. It began about 10 million years ago on a forest floor in Africa when a small ape picked up a piece of fruit that had been lying on the ground a little too long and felt something strange and warm for the very first time. In 2014, a biologist at UC Berkeley named Robert Dudley gave that moment a name, the drunken monkey. When fruit falls and sits, its sugars break down, wild yeast moves in, and the flesh quietly brews its own faint alcohol. The apes that ate it caught a small buzz. They had no idea why, but it felt good, so they came back. Over millions of years, they did not just tolerate alcohol, they evolved to hunt for it. Then genetics supplied the missing evidence. In 2015, scientists reconstructed a 10-million-year-old version of the enzyme our bodies use to process alcohol. One mutation made our ancestors roughly 40 times better at breaking down ethanol. 40 times. That is not a preference. That is hardware. That adaptation helps explain why our lineage could tolerate fermented fruit long before deliberate brewing. So the appetite was ancient. The real question is when we finally learned to make it on purpose. In 2018, archaeologists digging in Raqefet Cave near Haifa found stone mortars cut straight into the bedrock, and inside them, residue of wheat and barley that had been soaked, sprouted, and left to ferment. Beer. Brewed in a cave 13,000 years ago by people called the Natufians. And here is what matters. The Natufians had not yet become farmers. They had not invented agriculture. They did not grow that barley. They gathered it wild by hand. Yet brewing mattered enough that they cracked it first. Sit with that. The familiar sequence runs one way. Farming, settlement, then alcohol. Raqefet flips it. They were brewing before farming became their way of life, and they were not alone. 1,000 years later, hunter-gatherers in what is now southeastern Turkey built something that still resists a simple explanation. At a site called Göbekli Tepe, they raised stone pillars weighing more than 10 tons, stood them in careful rings, and carved them with animals. Before farming, before pottery, before anyone in that region had a permanent home. For years, no one could explain why nomads would haul 10-ton stones uphill and carve them by hand. What could possibly be worth that? Then they found the vats, and inside, chemical traces of fermented grain. Not a few cups worth. Enough for a crowd. A leading interpretation is that Göbekli Tepe was not an ordinary settlement. It may have drawn people across the region to gather, feast, and drink, which forces one of the oldest questions in archaeology. Why did we start farming at all? Patrick McGovern, a leading authority on ancient alcohol, spent decades arguing for one answer. Grain may not have been planted for bread alone. Beer may have been part of the prize. Think about the work involved. Bread means grinding, kneading, baking. A long, fussy chain. Compared with bread, beer can look deceptively simple. Soak the grain, wait, and fermentation begins. McGovern argues that the pull of alcohol may have given people another reason to stay put. If he is right, alcohol was not merely a reward that followed settled life. It may have been one reason people chose to settle. By 9,000 years ago, we were not guessing anymore. In a village called Jiahu in central China, pottery jars still hold the residue of a drink made from rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn. The oldest confirmed alcohol recipe anywhere on Earth. And it was not a lucky accident. It was a blend, ingredients chosen and combined on purpose. Whoever brewed that knew exactly what they were doing. By the time Egypt rose, beer was not a treat. It was part of the infrastructure. The workers who built the pyramids received beer as part of their rations, often described as 4 to 5 liters a day. Not a luxury, a daily ration. Beer. That had practical value. Brewing and fermentation made beer a useful staple when untreated river water was risky. It carried calories too. For a man dragging limestone through desert heat, that was not a drink. It was lunch.
And be honest, out in that heat, offered a bag of coins or 5 liters of cold beer. Which are you taking? Right. Same.
Then there was the sacred side. The Egyptians believed beer was a gift from the god Osiris. Doctors stirred herbs into it and prescribed it for everything from a sour stomach to an infection. So a single cup was doing the work of a paycheck, a water filter, a meal, a medicine, and a prayer, all at once, all from the same drink. But alcohol was not only shaping civilization, it was still shaping us. If one drink makes your face hot and red, that is not simply weakness. It reflects a genetic difference in alcohol metabolism. One hypothesis links the rise of an East Asian variant affecting the body's second alcohol processing enzyme to the spread of rice farming and rice wine roughly 2 to 3,000 years ago. Today, hundreds of millions of people carry it. Our genes spent millions of years learning to chase alcohol. A few thousand years ago, some of us quietly began evolving the other way. Your body is still arguing about that first fallen fruit. So here's the whole arc, start to finish. 10 million years ago, a buzz helped an ape find food. 13,000 years ago, we brewed in caves before we could farm. 12,000 years ago, we may have raised the first monuments just to drink together. 9,000 years ago, we had recipes. 5,000 years ago, whole civilizations depended on it. Alcohol did not simply arrive after the world around us took shape. It may have helped shape that world. Every drink you take continues something older than the name of your own species. The same pull that moved one small ape toward one rotting piece of fruit on a forest floor. We just learned how to make it on purpose. Every study behind this, the genes, the caves, the recipes, is linked in the description if you want to keep digging.